I honestly think I may have found my new favorite female protagonist in manga in this cybernetic badass known as Alita, the Angel of Death or Battle Angel. This is a manga that I have been wanting to read for a while, and I was feeling the need to do something that was old school and get some of that classic Japanese dystopian future cyberpunk aesthetic back into my life. And so, this is the one I went for. And it absolutely delivered. Originally released in 1990 and spanning only 9 volumes of content, the Alita manga, I would say, is fairly well known despite being so short and never actually having a really solid anime adaptation. Apparently there was an OVA also in the 90s with only 2 episodes, but that's about it. And then in 2019, shockingly, there was an American live-action movie. And yeah, I know, live-action anime has a bad rap and most of it sucks ass, but the Alita movie, which I have seen, is actually really good. It was directed by Robert Rodriguez, who makes a lot of great genre films like From Dusk Till Dawn or Sin City. He also made Shark Boy and Lava Girl, so take that for what it is. But I definitely plan to rewatch the movie now after reading the manga, and I am both pleased to say that the movie is pretty close in tone and story, but I'm also incredibly upset that there's not going to be a sequel because the second half of the Alita manga is where it got good. Like, really, really good. My favorite part of the manga by far. Essentially, the opening premise is that whatever life remains on Earth is separated into 2 places, kind of like a class system. There's the surface level junkyard that is riddled with crime, murders, people barely able to make ends meet and survive, and it's literally littered with junk and scraps. And floating high above that is the utopia of Tiferes, or it's also translated as Zalem in some of the translations. I'm not sure which term is technically correct, but this is where the majority of the wealth and resources are, but it's near impossible to reach. Only attached to the ground by these huge cables, and if you try to climb them, they have blades that will rip you apart. The manga begins with a mechanic named Ido who stumbles upon Alita in the junk, nothing more than a head and some upper body left of her. She's a cyborg, she has a human brain but with a completely mechanical body. But as Ido puts her back together and awakens her, she has no memory of where she came from or who she is. Ido quickly grows fond of her innocence and beauty and begins treating her kinda like his own daughter, being extremely protective over her and cautious knowing the dangers of the world that are out there. But it's not long before Alita's natural proclivity for discovery leads her into hostile territory. The entire manga to me kind of feels like it's split up into 3 distinctive parts. I'm going to try not to spoil anything, but I'll give you a brief overview of how I see the splits. The first part focuses mostly on Alita and Ido and their dynamic together, and it's definitely Alita at her most innocent. She's only interested in discovery and shows signs early on that she is well equipped at problem solving, deduction, and even fighting, knowing an ancient martial art that is not very common. And the whys and hows of it all are kept mostly in the background for quite a while. But she discovers that Ido basically makes his living being called what is known as a hunter, and no, not that kind of hunter. A bounty hunter, essentially. The scrapyards they live in is riddled with crime and murder, and Ido hunts them down. He defeats them or kills them, and uses the reward money to fund his actual passion, which is cybernetic creations. Alita decides to join the hunters and is, well, incredibly good at it. The first portion of the manga is probably your most generic part, kind of a paint-by-numbers fighting manga for a little while. Alita makes enemies being a hunter, a lot of them come back for revenge. Because she's a cyborg, she can also obtain upgrades of her body, ones that make her faster and stronger, and this plays out back and forth for a bit. But then a tragic event plays out, which I won't give away, which makes Alita understand how gray the world really is, and has her experience a significant loss in her life. And this loss would cause her to leave Ido's side for a while and venture further into the world on her own. Which eventually leads to the second portion of the manga, which I can only describe as, it's a sports manga now. Well, kind of. There exists a competitive game called Motorball. It's a high-speed run on a track getting a ball from one end to the other, but you can literally rip your opponents apart in the process. From the outside, these games are a distraction for the people in the slums to avoid their oppression, but in the field, it's a game of life or death. She gets the reputation of being known as the Killing Angel and takes it extremely seriously. There's a lot of fun to be had in this portion, a lot of adrenaline, a lot of fight scenes, and new characters to meet as well, like Shumira, who is totally waifu material in many ways, and she's not in this manga enough. But it's all in a process of Alita trying to discover herself. A large part of the manga is really about her development as a person, despite being a cyborg. She feels hopeful, optimistic, but then she experiences pain and loss. She sees the dark side of the world. She becomes isolated for a bit, she becomes bitter for a while, and then is driven with pure, unrelenting purpose. And it's within finding that purpose that we explore her through the final third of the manga, and by far my favorite part. And look, without too many spoilers, Alita eventually winds up forced into a partnership with the Utopia above her and becomes an agent for them, carrying out tasks mostly against her own desires but for the hope of protecting someone else. And this is where the series really shifts into how intense and dark that it can go. You know how much I love conspiracies. Well, when it comes to the floating Utopia, there are huge revelations that are at play. Information that is so haunting it makes people want to literally erase their memories from even knowing it, and a twisted mad scientist at the helm of it all named Nova. And this guy is just absolutely batshit wild, dude. Like he's intelligent, like he's a genius, but man, he's crazy. He really is a mad scientist. Alita meets resistance fighters attempting to blow the city out of the sky, all the while she's working for them reluctantly with promises that of course they don't intend on keeping. And watching Alita struggle with the right decisions and how far away it is from where she started, back when it was just hunt down the bad guy, but here the bad guys aren't so cut and dry. And as the people of the world struggle to find their freedom within this oppression, Alita does her best to satisfy not just her own search for meaning, but for humanity as well. Oh, she also kicks fucking ass. I cannot tell you how many times I got hyped as hell when Alita was like, alright, I'm not playing around anymore, and she just absolutely wrecks her opponents. I also like how the action sequences are drawn. They're very easy to follow with the choreography, and they are usually over pretty quick. It gives you the feeling that Alita is very efficient at what she does, and you feel the impact like Alita's augmented body is moving at super fast speeds, carrying a ton of weight behind each and every blow. She battles her way through mechanical and human enemies alike, through people trying to manipulate and control her, and through her own mind and hallucinations that dwell within, along with her lost memories that only really become a factor towards the very end, but it's yet another struggle to overcome. The reason I think she's my new top lady protagonist now is I think her journey, though only through 9 volumes of content, really represents the human experience very well. From innocence to heartache, from pain and loss to doing desperately anything to help the people that you love, to missing and reflecting on the past, to wishing you could go back to that comforting feeling, but knowing that as you progress, you have to continue forward and that there is no turning back. She's not portrayed as just a straight-up fighting angry machine despite the title Battle Angel, and she isn't a strong character only because she's physically strong or domineering. There's many times where she breaks down in tears or shows her goofy feminine side or happiness to be with somebody that she loves. She covers all aspects of being a human being in an extremely honest way. She begins wanting to find out who she is, and through the course of the manga, she becomes who she is. Through the experience, pain, battle, affection, and that hope for the future. She is anything but a one-note character, and it's the shifts and changes within her character that make her excellent. The side cast is also good, but it tends to shift here and there depending on where Alita is at the moment, since she's the main draw despite some pretty great supporting casts within. It's a seinen manga, so there are times that it gets a bit dark, but I don't think it goes too crazy or overboard at any moment. There's not a lot of gore since it's mostly cyborgs and robots that she's fighting, and the nudity is kept at a minimum, but occasionally pops up reminding you that, oh yeah, this is a seinen. It's going to give you a lot of action and a lot of heart, and also a look at a dystopian future which becomes more and more relevant with the advancement of AI. If I could talk spoilers, I would go into more detail about how AI is probably going to cause a specific thing that's revealed at the end of this manga to happen to humanity one day, and it's actually terrifying. But until then, let's just look at Alita. She's pretty. If I had any gripes with the manga, I would probably say the first half of the manga feels a little bit generic and might turn some people off, but it's worth getting through it to make it to the second half. That's not to say the first half is bad, it's absolutely not. It just isn't quite as good as that second half. Besides that, maybe the manga could have been a little longer. I would have liked to read a little bit more of her experience, but I know there are some spin-off mangas that are out there which I might check out. Also, the final 2 chapters, though interesting, they weren't quite as epic as the climax that had happened just before them. But besides that, I highly recommend checking out the Battle Angel Alita manga. And like I said, I know that there are some sequel manga out there, and I might check them out sometime in the near future. But until then, I can say I'm a huge fan of its original run. If you've read Alita, let me know what you think about it down below in the comments. What was your favorite segment of the story, favorite characters, anything you want to share, leave that down below. Other than that, guys, thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Give it a like and a comment to help it out in the algorithm, because it really does help when you do those things. And if you want to support the channel on that deeper level, I have channel memberships, Patreon, all that linked down below, even for as low as $1. I'd really appreciate it. Other than that, guys, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.